Joe, City of Port Orchard work study session for April 21st. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We are right on time, and we'll start with, I'll introduce Mr. Dorsey, who's got the number one presentation for tonight.
Okay, thank you. So I guess it's not really a presentation. It's more of a discussion. As you know, we have a contract for solid waste services with Waste Management, and we've been operating a number of years under that contract, a number of renewals, and so the current contract is up for renewal. I think they're 5-year terms. And so we discussed this briefly at the last Friday's utility committee meeting. In the packet we have the current contract with Waste Management having gone through and I guess made quite a few edits, which are tracked changes. I know that Morris Law also looked through those track changes and had no issues. So at this point, I think staff's hoping to move ahead with this contract. We've always had good service, and the rates have always been the established tariff rates in the state. So I guess with that.
So does this contract affect the rates, or we just continue to be subject to what the tariff rates the state sets?
Right, I believe it's the prior, and I'll have Laura Mosier from Waste Management maybe can come up to the table and ask specific questions, because she is the solid waste queen and I am not.
Recycling queen.
Oh, you're doing recycling. Is Dean Benning the solid waste king?
I guess, he'd probably like to think of himself like that, yes. So the existing contract is just as follows the UTC, or Washington Utility and Transportation Commission rate structure. And it is in our tariff 20 that is part of the Kitsap County area. So we pretty much cover, our tariff covers from the Pierce County border all over Kitsap County. So we have UTC rate structure in that tariff, and the city has the benefit of that rate structure and the density of 40,000 plus customers that we service. So we right now have just proposed to move ahead with the existing rate structure because it really is a benefit for the city to be under that versus anything different.
Do you cover the entire county or the entire county except Bainbridge Island?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, Bainbridge Island
Well,
is,
Paulsbo.
and Paulsbo has a city contract. We have a city contract, separate city contract with Bremerton and Port Orchard. Bremerton has its own rate structure versus using the UTC rate structure.
Is that rate structure for the 5 years of the contract, or does it change during the contract?
The only time it would ever change, I brought a little printout for you too, just, you don't have to read it right now, but it's from the UTC, and it's how they manage the rate making process. We can't just say, oh, we need a rate increase and increase, or base it on a consumer price index or anything like that. I'll just pass those around. We have to make a filing with the state. We have to come in and produce documentation about why we want an increase. It's a pretty involved process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of public input from it also. Most of the time when a rate increase happens, or when we ask for one, we've had substantial increases in our costs over a period of time, or if there's a disposal increase in Kitsap County because they control that, we would go in and ask for that increase. Typically those are pass-throughs. Did I print enough? Barely.
So how do the ratepayers know what the rates are?
Well, I attempted to put together a rate sheet for you, and that was the draft document I prepared. It was trying to work off of the tariff, which is this document. So the tariff is actually a kind of a gnarly thing to read and figure out. So it was my attempt to give you an idea of what that is, to answer questions. The one thing that I did put on here that we do not currently do in the city of Port Orchard is the CAN rates on residential, because we do a cart-based service right now in Port Orchard. So the carts are provided by Waste Management. If they're damaged or broken, we replace those. There's not additional cost to the customer. So in the rate sheet, I had added in CAN rates, which they're in our tariff, but it's not how we're servicing the city currently.
The county does cans, I believe.
Yeah, county has some cans, yes, definitely. Carts are really a nicer way, not only for us for an efficiency purposes, but for the city and for the customer. It kind of controls things blowing around, lids coming off because they're attached, there's wheels, people can get them out to the curb easier. And like I said, if they're broken or damaged, we replace those. So.
I guess one question, we've had a lot of, in the past, people that haven't necessarily wanted to have their garbage picked up, that the city has a code that requires, but a customer has the ability to customize their service, correct?
In that, the way the UTC requires that we do bills, it allows us to break out the recycling piece. It's not an option of whether you have the recycling or not. I mean, it's your option whether you're going to use it or not, but it's automatically a part of your service. And that's why it's broke out on the rate sheet. It shows you what your garbage cost is, what your recycle cost. And then every once a year, not every once a year, we go back at the previous year and look at the recycling commodities, the dollars that we've taken in for the materials that we've collected. That's what the recycling credit debit column is on here. So there's a credit that's applied to customers' bills. The option you have, to Mark's point, to customize your service is around the yard waste service, the yard food service, and that is what we call subscription service or additional cost if it's something that you want to have at your home.
So if I suddenly had kids that moved out of the house and my waste stream dropped significantly, I could say, just pick me up every other cycle.
Well, you can, our rate structure had in the tariff, we can go down to once a month. Typically, that's what we call non-putrescible waste. So once a month, non-putrescible is going to be the non-stinky. So not your typical, oh, here's my leftovers in the garbage can and whatnot. So you're usually doing some composting, you're utilizing your yard waste service, you're using recycling. But a person could drop down to that if it was, one person.
Right.
And they didn't, you could go down to that. You could go down as small as a 20-gallon can, which is pretty small.
But we can't do cans.
About this high. Well, that is the one can we have because we don't do a cart in that. It falls, it gets top heavy. It's hard for the truck to pick up. So that is one that we do. It's the only one that we do as a can because it's so small.
What's that on this sheet? I don't see the.
It's, it says mini can.
Mini can?
Yeah.
32 gallon?
It's a 20-gallon.
I don't see it on the chart.
It's right above the 32-gallon can.
The mini can is, where it says mini can, that's not a header, that's the actual.
Oh, mini can, okay.
Yeah.
That's not a
I'm
header.
sorry, this is really small. I didn't mean for it to be quite so itty bitty.
gallons or something.
So I guess my point is that they're
There's options.
individually with, as a customer, you can customize your
Costs more.
needs.
Absolutely.
Can you do a 20-gallon on a monthly?
No, there is no 20-gallon monthly price. It's just a weekly collection on that. And again, this is all out of the tariff.
So I think we all saw the correspondence recently about the gentleman that is a contractor and he has to deliver his own waste anyways. So he's taking his household waste with him and he wanted to opt out of this. See the heads nod, so we're all looking.
We're, we get those requests at utility couple times a year.
Okay.
And it's just this, our challenge is from a public health standpoint, we don't, I appreciate that he has access to a dumpster, but we want this garbage gone once a week so that we're not having rodent issues, smell issues, so on and so forth.
Mine's picked up once a month.
Yours is picked up once a month.
Really?
It is? Everything? Recycling and everything?
Actually, I think, well,
Recycling's every other week.
Yeah, recycling's every other week.
maybe every other week.
Picked up once a week.
But then you have a once a month pickup. Do you do the mini?
I have a little green can, but I don't think it's, I think it's more than two. Do the green? Yeah. I don't know if they'll use sizes. They'll use, there's a small.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so at this point, will this be, I think, Brandy, you're gonna bring, are you gonna bring a red line back or just, of the contract?
I just need to know if the council wants to have a public hearing. The last time around, they held a public hearing. If so, we'll move forward with the public hearing, the first meeting in May, and then we can have a simultaneous, whatever, immediate adoption of the contract in the first meeting in May, or we can hold off until the end of May, whichever you prefer.
So then it was a resolution
Correct.
as well, yeah.
Only takes a minute.
We have to provide notice, a 60-day notice? I had a note from Carol.
We'll double check on the noticing requirements. We'll make sure we meet the noticing requirements.
I know there's different noticing requirements for different things. I didn't realize this was a 60-day notice.
Perhaps because it involves a rate increase, it would be a longer notice.
There's no,
Oh, but there's not a rate
there's
increase.
no rate
It's
increase.
no,
It's a new contract.
Yeah.
Mayor, do you have a recommendation on this contract?
I haven't really looked at every line item here, and I wanted to read that, but, so I don't have one at the moment. But normally, I have heard those same comments about those few people that just don't use the service and would like to opt out. Of course, our regulation does not allow that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's separate from this.
That's separate, so, okay.
That's a separate issue, and I still want to.
Like, you'd have to change the municipal code to do that. This is just getting us back under contract.
Do you anticipate any changes in the way that food waste is going to be collected? Currently, I believe you put it in with the compost and the yard.
It goes in with the yard waste, yeah.
Because it seems like Seattle's doing even another separate stream of,
Seattle kind of, does their own thing, right? I mean,
no, I
they have
admire
their-
what they're doing, but do they have like a separate one just for food waste?
It's the same, it all goes to the same place. I mean, it's, the yard waste and food waste, it's all mixed together. So sometimes you have restaurants, that just have food waste, but residentially, the idea is to have it food waste and yard waste, mixed together, to keep it simple for the resident. But I don't foresee any changes. The only changes that would ever come down the pike is if something happened at one of the disposal sites or the processing facilities where all the yard waste and food waste goes to.
I guess sometimes I'm a pessimist and I visualize everybody rinsing their cans and taking off their labels and they're separating into these 4 different piles and the 4 different trucks pick them up. And then if you were to follow, like put a GoPro on one of those things, all of a sudden it would just end up in the same place, all just mush back together, so.
Well, it's not that bad. We do separate that stuff.
So what are our options?
Accept or not accept?
Well, we either go with this contract and go under the tariff, or we hire a consultant to develop a solid waste RFP, because we have nobody in-house that has solid waste experience, and go through a process.
Well, Carol mentioned that she'd just done an RFP for Pacific, so we have a template to go from.
So Pacific is another one of my customers. So just to tell you a little bit about that, it's a very different circumstance. I guess I'd first talk about your contract. It expires the end of June. There are no extensions left. So you're kind of not, you don't have much of a window of opportunity to even utilizing Pacifics to try to pull that together and select somebody, and if it was somebody different than us, to have them get the equipment and come into place. City of Pacific was in a situation where another hauler threatened to sue them if they didn't put it out to bid, because we were in negotiations with them for a new contract, and they were kind of pushed into a corner with that. So
I think
it's
that,
a kind of
what
an
we're
unfortunate
Dealing
situation.
with is not the things that we've been talking about, but the truth is the public isn't coming in here and saying we're paying too much. There's a few people come in and say they don't want to do this, but the public isn't coming in and saying, oh gosh, that's too high.
Yeah.
So that's why.
And I, when you select to go out to bid, as, just as a city, then you lose the density of the 40,000 customers, where you have a rate structure that's built upon, and then it becomes a rate structure built upon what's just within your city limits, which oftentimes could, bring your rates back higher than where you're at today. And you become, staff has to manage that contract. You have CPI increases that come along, with a rate structure like that. There's just a lot of different things involved in a franchise agreement that's specific to the city with rates like that. So those are conversations that if that's something that you look at towards the future, I would think some careful consideration and conversation around that would be good. Trying to do it in 2 months, 2 months before a contract expires would be very challenging.
I think for me, the biggest, our public works department does a lot, transportation, water, sewer, storm, facilities, parks. We try to throw solid waste management on top of that. We're talking hiring staff to manage that. There's,
Manage what? Because I'm not following.
if we were to basically have a contract for just the city, I think there'd be more hands-on day-to-day of operation of that contract and
Is that
management.
what we have now as a contract just for the city?
We have a contract that's spread out with waste management over a 40,000 population. We have very little.
Well, we take advantage of the fact that it's spread out and the fact that we use the UTC approved rates for that full 40,000. But we do, if I understand it correctly, have a contract for the collection in the city.
You do, and it follows the UTC. So it follows the services that are in the UTC, and you also have Kitsap County that manages your public education for you.
Right.
So everything lines up with the UTC as far as rate structure. It also lines up with the county code, your municipal code, and the county's public education programs and processes.
So Mark, do you have any idea what an independent garbage company may, what it would look like as far as staff time?
Yeah, I'm not, whether that's just my thought of picking up, there would be some additional amount of time and effort in managing this outside of our current structure. I don't think I
You don't know exactly.
put a number
Okay.
to it, but I
Well,
could tell you there would be.
Okay, I won't put you on the spot, but you definitely know there'll be some,
There would, just preparing the RFP and managing it, the time and involvement in that is additional staff time. And like I said, you've got the work that the county does as part of this, which is all the education outreach pieces in their overall
Their comp plan.
contract, in their, because we're under the Kitsap County Solid Waste Comprehensive Plan. They do all that work, so.
So if we went out to bid, we would lose that?
Yeah, if we went independently, we would fall outside of the umbrella of the county's solid waste comprehensive plan.
So the county is requiring us to be a purchaser of the waste management services. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I would look at more as that there's a, think of it as bundling your utilities. There's a benefit to bundling your phone and internet and cable,
Well, I understand the benefits, but I'm asking specifically, will the county throw us out of this education system that they have if we were not to go with waste?
Well, if I
Yes.
can speak to that a little bit. Typically, the county does it because it's all falls under kind of the UTC, and they also have oversight of the materials that go into your recycle program, the materials that go into your yard waste and food waste. If you were to go out to bid, you would have to, the hauler would have to start preparing that education program and material for you, and those costs then would be a part of your package, so to speak, or your new agreement. And you could do as little or as much as you wanted to, but the county would probably, and I'm not gonna speak for the county, but they would probably step away from doing mailings to, you know, your residents at this point, or, you know, kind of handling some of that they handle today.
I've yet to get a mailing from the
Oh,
county, so how does Bainbridge Island deal with it?
I'm not familiar with their program, so at Bainbridge Island.
Or Paulsville. I mean, they have their own collection, you know, it's part of the Public Works, it's a department, so.
That's the same with
Contracts
Paulsville?
with Bainbridge.
Paulsboro's got
Yes.
their own garbage truck.
They have their trucks, they have their own landfill.
Yeah, I think Paulsbo manages their own garbage, they collect their own garbage, and I believe Bainbridge Disposal collects their recycling and their yard waste. But I don't know what that contract looks like or anything about it, other than that.
So what I'm sensing here is we've been given insufficient time if we wanted to make change. So I'm just curious how long the city attorneys and waste management have been working on this. Because we didn't see this draft contract until last Friday. The
That was my
utilities.
question, because there's no opportunity to do it
Yeah.
differently.
Sounds like it's too late.
Yeah, so how long has this been being worked on?
We, I guess, just recently. I mean,
Yeah, I think
we've just always renewed this every 5 years.
I guess
So
I would like some more lead time in the future to, if we wanted to make a change. I'm not saying I wanted to, but that option's really been taken off the table because we don't have enough time to even consider those
Well,
options.
there's a termination clause, I'm sure, there, in the contract.
Well, it's typically, that's a 5-year contract, so basically, everything that you have is just renewing the way it is. So it's a 5-year contract with 1 3-year and 1 2-year extension. We've updated the language in the contract to be more current with the comp plan, with your ordinances, and descriptions of, you know, what a card is, you know, what's multifamily, to try to spell that out a little bit more. If you enter into this, you know, enter into agreement, typically the out is the service is so horrendous, horrible, and we're not performing, you have to get rid of us, you know, for the health and well-being of your city. I mean, that's typically what happens with any garbage contract. So this is a 5-year with extensions. You could at the end of, well, you wouldn't do it at the end of 5 years. You'd want to allow yourself at least a year lead time if you wanted to go into a bid process.
Yeah, I
So
guess
the
that's,
termination is termination for cause. only.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know all the lawyer talk.
I don't either.
Well, that was
Well,
good, though.
yeah, I guess my apologies, we've just always renewed this, and I didn't think that there was even any consideration that we would go out and, you know, wander from the herd. So if that's something that is like a 2016 that we want to put in as a
I don't think it'll be
goal.
in 2016, it's gonna
It'll
be
be 5 years.
Well,
5
no,
years.
No, but to start, I mean, if it's something that we need to put on a long-range goal to go out and get an RFP, then I would take that direction and start working on it, because it is a
maybe
lot of
4
work.
years from now, we need to have, you know, flag your calendar to have a work study discussion. So we're a year out from when this contract, you know, we might be
Because we used to have
happy as a
long-range,
clam with what we've got, but
we used to have long-range goals. That could be in 2016, you could say as a long-range goal, we want to look at going out for an RFP. And then we could schedule that.
it'd be silly to do that in 2016, we've got a 5-year deal here.
No, I'm saying in
It would be
2016.
a long-range
That is a
goal.
long-range goal to
In 2016,
4 years, start working on it.
I guess I'd just like it on the utility committee's radar 4 years from now.
If I could ask too, I don't know, are there some concerns with your service today and the rates and,
No, I
the
think
things that are there? Are there things that you're interested in having that you don't?
No, but for myself, if we just repetitively do the same thing, I think that periodically it's appropriate to evaluate that and see what other options are available to us.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that philosophy, but there's certain things, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of a thing. I mean, this isn't like where you go out and periodically and have consultants and you get a bid, just like we did with the water testing, just to see what the rates were. I mean, this is a fairly elaborate mechanism between the relationship between the county, waste management, how the county went out for their bid process. I think it was Waste Management for Bonko, there was this whole process. They've got an entire solid waste division that develops comprehensive plans and standards and oversees it. There's a division up there, and I guess I'm just nervous knowing what we have to take care of as a small city, and to suddenly think that we're gonna add anything else to our plate. I guess I just feel like I'm gonna go underwater.
I don't think we're asking you to put anything else on your plate. We might want to have a discussion on whether or not we want to open this up to, a bid process.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting though is just to get it out to a bid process and going out, there's a whole host of unintended consequences that will come with that. So I'm just speaking my mind and probably out of turn, but I apologize if I'm being argumentative.
I was mainly interested in the options.
And-
the only option we're being presented with is sign up, good, bad, or otherwise, so. That's all.
Could you put a clause in the contract that says that renewal has to come in, a request has to come in by a certain date, or, is that a way that it would be Waste Management's burden to bring a request to the city to extend the contract after 5 years?
I can't remember how it's written in there right now, if it's a city sole or if it's a mutual.
That's a good question. Do we have an option in 5 years or 10 years?
What's that?
So the question is, do we have an option in 5 years, or it's just,
Well, you have extensions. Let me get to that real quick.
but do we have to have a reason to not extend it?
So there's 5 years. So it's a mutual to extend the agreement for using that first extension, that first 2 year. So it couldn't be me coming in as Waste Management and saying, oh, we need our extension. It has to be, we sit down and we mutually agree that
That is,
the
the
terms
first
and
extension
conditions.
is when?
It's in 5 years.
In 5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, and just so you know, too, typically contracts that we work with, will go 7 years, and then we do 2 2-year extensions. But with this one, for whatever reason, it's always been like the 5 years and then another 5 years. And I don't know if that's around your ordinance, with the length of the contract.
It's been a year since I looked at it.
Probably not something you pull up often.
No, it's not.
I like the service to facilities clause, and I appreciate that we're getting collection included. But it does refer to Exhibit A, which is blank. Do we have a completed Exhibit A somewhere? Just-
I don't have it
Okay.
with that, so yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I mean, our real Exhibit A
Yeah.
does have actual.
It'll have the
Okay.
addresses of City Hall and what the services are and parks and all of the city facilities, yes.
And I think that I would actually like to see that extended to City Hall where people can recycle.
I would assume we do service here already, but I don't know
We
that.
don't have recycling outside, but we do have receptacles.
Yeah, as long as there's space there, I mean, we can.
Yeah, we have
can do that.
recycling. We have a really good relationship with Waste Management. They do certain things without charge, and one of them is all the recycling downtown. They just do that
I appreciate that.
pro-grab, they provide the cars, they pick it up. Our shop, the big, huge commercial dumpsters, we don't get charged for that. So, we're very happy with our relationship. Because we pick up stuff off the roads and, it goes in, so it's kind of for the better common good, rather than just sitting there on the side of the road. So, it's a mutual agreement that we have.
So this excludes hazardous and dangerous waste.
Correct.
So how is that handled?
We do cleanups, and we have publicized, get rid of your paint.
This is through the Public Works Department? then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 2 cleanup weeks where people can get rid of certain items, and then we have other publicized, come and dispose of your medicines through the police department, and we have, you can bring in your paints and turpentines and all sorts of other household poisonous things, and that's just through the Public Works Department. But we work with
Kids and kids.
County.
the county on those programs.
Those are typically not things that we collect, ever, knowingly.
Right.
Thank you.
Next item is Transportation Council. You requested that we put discussion time for transportation at each meeting, so this is the opportunity.
What's the binder here we have? It says transportation fund.
Mr. Martin has finished that binder, and
So I think as I mentioned, along with my chart that Mark and Nick and my chart that we put together here, so I brought my pointer and I've been wanting to use this. We've expanded it beyond our earlier discussion when we talked about putting together a financing options report that would serve as a baseline for the council to make deliberations on looking forward to your 4 major projects that we identified on the chart there. So before I get started and say just a few things, I want to thank mention that this report was prepared in collaboration with Nick Bond and Mark Dorsey. I want to thank them for their help. We had staff members that provided major contributions to this effort were Heidi Draper, Deborah Walker, Melissa Gaines, and Elle Davis all worked to provide information there. The information in this binder there contains the known universe transportation funding options available to the city. These are the tools that are in the toolbox. It's up to the council to make the policy choices leading to any of its options being adopted. The appendices that are provided at the back of the report are the source documents that the report is written from. So you can go there and see in detail some of the information. The information in the report, there's other documentations and written publications as well that would help you understand as well as we go through this. I guess because this is multidisciplinary and took all 3 of us to do this, I would mention that the city attorney can provide guidance to adopting the legal structure for these financings. The community development director can place the transportation projects that you agree to in the comprehensive plan, which makes it move forward. The city engineer can provide the construction plans and the estimates. And of course, the treasurer can collect and distribute those funds, which the council ultimately can choose to authorize by their policy choices here. The report does not recommend specific funding choices. So it's really a document that leaves blank the summary. That would be the policy choice by the 7 of you. Chapter 1 provides an outline of funding sources and options and then describes each. Chapter 2 provides revenue estimates for each source. Historical funding amounts are provided where variables exist that make estimates unreliable. So we went back there and showed, based on past performance, how the city was able to allocate money. An example would be, trying to estimate what property tax could be collected in 5 years from now. That's a crystal ball that none of us have in the state of Washington with all the moving parts property tax, for example. Chapter 3 provides the outline for funding plans for the 4 distinct transportation challenges. It does not estimate revenue or funding sources, as I mentioned before. When you look at the back page, there's 3 columns that run across that show expenses, it shows progress, it shows spend down. What it doesn't show is the revenue stream that would be identified by your funding choices. That council would need to identify the revenue elements. I'd encourage you to keep this document as you all discuss this. And I would suggest that where you find questions to write in the margins and make it a working document. I have, and Mark and Nick and I have every expectation that these estimates will change. These were a moment in time as of April 17th of this year. And we know statutes will change, revenue sources will change, construction costs are going to change. So this is just in a moment in time, and so this will continue to evolve as we go forward. So with that, that's how you look at the document. We worked really hard at listening to what you all have been saying, trying to narrow down what the expectations are of the public that we've heard discussed, and tried to put them in one document that's in front of you tonight, tailored to, specifically to the city of Port Orchard, and sourced it as best possible. And it's our best work to date to make it a usable document. And I just would ask Nick and Mark to comment if they'd like.
Just to reiterate, I think this is basically what's been requested to start having a transportation conversation. And I have to give more kudos to Alan for pulling this whole thing together. He's been the lead on this, and this is not simple reading. I mean, this isn't something that we're going to obviously digest tonight. It's very complicated, a lot of moving parts, and I think Alan did a fantastic job pulling this together.
It is.
I have just a question. When we look at this sheet, and
Which appendix?
it's the tree, I just pulled out Tremont Appendix 1. The way I'm reading this, we anticipate it's going to take us from, I'm reading it that it's a 2-year construction phase, and we pay for it over those 2 years. And when I look at, so that's the way all of these are. We can actually go year to year and figure out where we have to pay for things.
Your grant, and, well, before we do that, I'd like to hear Nick compliment me too, I guess.
You'd like that, would you?
I'm shameless.
Yeah, Alan and I and Mark met on this, and ultimately, I think we divided up tasks, but Alan ended up doing most of the assembling of the document, and so I certainly appreciate the contribution, but I think council's already given direction to go forward and at least prepare the impact fee for consideration.
That process. I know we've had presentations here.
Well, we're talking to the city attorney about the logistics with actually putting it in the comp plan, and it's possible that we may do a resolution first and then put it in the comp plan at the end of the year, depending on whether we get other comp plan applications in. And because we're only allowed to amend the comprehensive plan once per year, if we amend it for the 6-year street plan, that means we can't do citizen amendments later in the year because those aren't considered an emergency, and there is no exception for a second amendment if it's citizen related. So we have to see what comes in over the next 2 months for citizen initiated amendments, but we are moving forward to prepare it. And in the event that we don't have an annual amendment cycle this year because nobody applies, we'll probably amend the comprehensive plan sooner rather than later. So we're moving forward expecting to amend the plan in July, but if we get other amendments, it'll be postponed and we'll just do a resolution. And the other component of that is we're talking to Mr. Scrobat and Jim One concerning the relationship of the McCormick Woods impact fee to this impact fee, and it's likely that a development agreement is going to be needed, or an amendment to the development agreement is needed, and what that looks like, and whether it's solely between the city and Gem 1 or possibly involves the county, we're not totally sure yet, because it's really complicated, given that it started with the county and moved to the city, but some of the projects in that agreement are still in the county. So we're going to have to do some really heavy lifting, I think, on that issue, and we
Quite a bit
really,
of negotiation.
yeah, so we have to sort of sit down with everybody in the same room and work on that.
But we do recognize that there's an urgency to get the impact fees implemented. It's
Because we'd
just,
like to have some money in the bank when it comes time to pay for Tremont.
I think, to me, the biggest delay that was an unexpected delay was really once we thought we had a plan with the McCormick Urban Village Transportation Plan and those impact fees, and then when we got digging deeper, it was a much more difficult nut to crack. There was some, like I said, Nick said, you've got monies that the county are currently holding, you've got projects that were in a composite list that are still in the county, that they're still in our UGA, some are outside our UGA.
Reimbursing for. some
Reimbursing,
projects already.
the simple thought that we were just gonna say, okay, McCormick Urban Village will go away and just go included in the last tip that I provided, the transportation improvement plan, was, that it was a 3-tier plan. After we met here recently, we've actually moved into a potentially a 4-year plan. Tier. 4-year tier, because we are trying to have to address these McCormick projects maybe in a different way. So that's probably the biggest delay right now, is really trying to figure out how to deal with that existing impact fee.
And I think we're supposed to meet Thursday on this?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to meet with the attorney on Thursday and then talk about setting up a larger meeting and potentially involving the county and the developer, because if the county is willing to work with us on this, I think this is a lot easier to straighten out, but we just, we'll have more to tell you, I think, at the next work study.
Appreciate the update. I just wanted assurance that we're continuing to move forward. I didn't want to get to November and, we haven't worked on that in 6 months, because we have these other priorities.
My question for our group is, how do we want to move forward with this information? Because we know we have, how do we want to move forward? Do we want to discuss the Transportation Benefit District? In future months? Obviously, we have this to read and digest, but we also need a plan about how we are going to move forward. And staff's done an excellent job of giving us, information to this point.
For me, and this is just I want to see the transportation impact fee to fund for these mega projects and the growth-related projects. I also would like to see the transportation, what's this other one called? TBD?
Right, the Transportation
Benefit District. I would hope we could develop this piece prior to our next budget cycle. So
The TBD?
I would hope so. I would like us to, in 2016, to be doing $500,000 in residential paving, just this number I'm picking at. And from what I'm seeing here, if we can, get this in place, we can get 50% of that from this TBD, potentially.
Keep in mind that the step to create a TBD, you can create a TBD without adopting any fees. The TBD is the board.
Correct.
And so that's the first step in a 2-step process if you're going in the direction of card tab fees.
So maybe we need to get going on that piece of it, so that as we get to budget process, then we have those discussions, what that fee is.
Do we want to make sure that everyone is totally aware of what the TBD is and how it functions?
That's what I was going to say, that you obviously read this thing, because I haven't. And I would suggest that maybe at the next work study, that we have a serious discussion about the options in here. But right now, I'm not prepared to pick one over the other.
No,
I think it's
So maybe that's our homework?
that's our homework.
For next
And
month.
The next one is make sure we've got this read.
What are your favorite options going around the table?
And another update, I'm continuing to work with Kitsap County, remember the kind of countywide transportation or transition plan. We're going to be, it looks like that's gaining some momentum, so that'll be a huge benefit if we can have our 1991 required transition plan developed in 2016. So that'll be something that'll be in the budget. And it looks like the city will have to go alone on the pavement management system. I was trying to get them to just do it all, but there wasn't enough interest, so we can have a comprehensive transition plan, but the pavement management system will just be our own independent document. But those really need to be in the budget next year.
It can, and it depends on what you do and to what level you do it. I'm just gonna, when everybody does their homework, remembering at the PSRC meetings that I've gone to, and they're talking about the next federal funding cycle, they're indicating that there's a potential that you will score higher if you are part of a TBD, if you are already taking advantage of the funding tools that the state has provided to us.
And that's what Brianna is bringing back to us. Yeah.
I don't think this has anything to do with Brianna.
Yeah, I don't think it does either.
Well, she said that we would be in a better position.
Right.
So that's.
She's saying, she said the same thing Becca's saying,
Yeah,
yeah, which
yeah.
is coming from PSRC.
Right.
Actually.
Right. But she was bringing that back to us to get something like this in place, to be in a better position to receive funds.
I don't think she has anything to do with it.
Well, I'm just saying that's what she reported back to us, that's all.
She was saying we would be in a better
Yes.
position if we had it.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
That was
So,
her
Rob,
recommendation.
was your question if we prefer the TBD or the impact fees, or?
Oh, no, both.
I think.
Well, it's a
both.
combination.
I think we all need
Okay.
more.
No,
That's
I-
what was
yeah.
my comment was, but.
No, and I want them now.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm fine with reading this in detail and having detailed discussion, what everybody else feels are appropriate options next month.
Mark, do any of our projects qualify for the Tiger funding?
That's a
Tiger, the Tiger
Tiger.
grants.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think the best way I can answer that is generally no. But more importantly, the last time I met with Derek Kilmer's aide, oh no, it's Norm Dix's aide. I think when Norm Dix was still, he basically, because of all the changes in the federal funding rules, everybody was like slipping over to the Tiger Grant, and the Tiger Grant now has become extremely competitive because it's been overloaded. So I guess it's a two-part answer. Typically, the Tiger Grant relies heavily on regional impacts. So, regional centers, regional transportation corridors, air quality, those sorts of things, and much larger projects. And so it doesn't mean that we couldn't necessarily apply, but when you start looking at the scoring and you look at our projects, they don't score. And then the other piece is simply that everybody's seeming to jump on the Tiger bandwagon, and it's almost, according to that elected's aide, it's just being overwhelmed, and there's more projects than money available.
I think that's applicable to any grant opportunity, but that's an
Well-
awfully big bucket, that's why I was wondering if.
But especially more than lately because of the changes in MAP 21. And that acronym, I cannot remember. Something about making our roads better in the future.
Something, I know it. I couldn't do it either. I was having trouble with Tiger.
This is gonna be easy. Nobody said it would be easy, but we're
Yeah.
working on it.
It's an Obama thing. By the 21st century,
Moving ahead
making.
with progress in the 21st century.
What is it?
Moving ahead with progress in the 21st century, not 20.
Wow, Jeff.
Good job, Jeff.
There's a safety plan element that we just shared today, so that I'm aware of.
So is that the end of the discussion? Because I want to do this just one more time. Because it just aggravates people in the office when I do that.
Are they all cats?
And they're trying to work, so there you have it.
No, it's very good work, and thank you all
Yeah.
for putting it together.
I also like the Tremont plan up there. I think that's the show
Someday,
and tell.
someday it's gonna be in the ground, so.
Need for KRCC?
Okay, discussion about Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council.
Yeah, I have, if you don't mind, I'll read that.
Absolutely.
And before we get into, there's two parts that I really want to discuss. And one is a voting issue that's come up. But the other one is from our discussion when we were, when we continued the ILA, okay? Our council's concern was the reduced structure and potential costs. So what you have in your packet, I'm going to show you this one that looks like this. In your, it's the bottom one you have in your other hand, John. That one, right, okay. This one shows you the historic budget of KRCC back to 2000, well, it says 2010. Okay, so it shows you kind of where the budget has been. And I would like you to, if you're not already aware, the KitNet and the housing programs have moved out of this. So you're just kind of looking at the core area, the top, the core. Okay, so that's what it historically has been. You've got this one that's on the back side of here. And this shows you what we have paid in dues. So you can see 2008 and then 2011 to 13, 14, and 15. And you can see that we paid more in dues in 2008 than we have the subsequent years. And that's because that's when the recession hit and they scaled back their work scope. Okay, so what we provided you with was a history of the budget, a history of the dues. Okay? And then we provided you with, the dues are not changing, they're staying the same as they've been, but it also gives you just an idea. The first column is our current budget, and then if we were to move to an administering agency, it shows you what the dues would look like under a couple of those options. And then we just took a generic budget all the way out to $300,000, which is significantly more than we would anticipate needing. And it would show you what our dues are. I just wanted everyone, because you had concerns about the finances, and I've provided you a historic expenses, historic dues, and then potential dues.
Didn't legal give us a reason why we wanted to have an administrating agency?
Yes, yes, I can tell you about that piece. If,
10 words or less?
yes, if we,
Tonight?
if KRCC were to hire an executive director and have their own employees, they cannot do it under their current structure. We have to move to what's called a joint board, and we would need an administering agency. That's the cheapest, the least expensive way for us to execute that. we would not then have to rent our own facility, get our own accounting department, and a lot of things. That's what we would be using the administrative agency for. Okay. So, that was just to answer your questions, if and when the ILA comes back up for vote. That gives you a chance to look at those, because that's where our concern was.
Well, one of our concerns was the way they administered projects and having to pay upfront a certain percentage.
That was
Where's that gone?
That was,
That's what?
That was the grant. That
That's
was a
the
due,
grant.
different due structure
different.
that has died.
It's gone?
it's done.
Did
Okay.
everybody,
Well, then never mind.
except the
No.
county? Did
The
everyone else
county,
need it?
the county didn't support that either. It was just a proposal out there, and it got resistance. And so, we voted. Now,
What?
Yeah.
now, this is the guy that we really need to talk about tonight. And what has happened is, when the ILA was being adopted by the various jurisdictions, the city of Bremerton said, well, you've made all these changes to the ILA. We would like to change the voting structure of the ILA also, of the KRCC voting structure. And so they brought forward a proposal. And I did up this sheet for KRCC, and I'll explain it to you right now, because this is going to come, the voting structure is going to come back to KRCC on May 5th. And I felt it was important that we had a city position on it, rather than just one, because I will not be able to attend that KRCC meeting, Jeff is.
I'm going, and so this will help me.
Understand, yeah, what we're doing and what our position is. When you look at this, the way this is set up, it shows you the population of each of our jurisdictions. It shows you how they're represented, and then it shows you the population that each of us represent. That's just kind of to give you an idea of the number of people that the board represents there. And then the way the voting structure works right now, everyone, there are 12 votes available. The county commissioners have 3 votes. City of Bremerton has 3 votes. Bainbridge Island has 2. Port Orchard has 2. Paulsville has 1, and the Port of Bremerton has 1. So you need a majority of those 12 for any action to pass. In addition to that, 2 of the county commissioners must vote for an action for it to pass, and 2 of the cities must vote for an action to pass.
2 of the small cities.
It's just 2 of the cities.
Two cities.
2 cities,
To
okay.
the cities. Now, what Bremerton brought forward is for it to be just basically one vote, one person, and to remove the additional criteria.
Is that one of these alternatives?
Yes,
They
B.
want B.
They want
B.
They want non-weighted street.
In addition to that, since we had this discussion at KRCC, they came back and defined a quorum. And they defined a quorum as a majority of the jurisdictions represented. And then by one person at a meeting, meaning that only 4 jurisdictions would have to be there. So 2 jurisdictions, the county and the city of Bremerton, wouldn't even have to be there, and the cities could pass whatever they wanted.
Is there a definition yet of what the Port Bremerton is?
I asked that today, and the Port of Bremerton is a junior taxing district, and I'm not positive why they get to vote, but they are not classified as a city, nor are
So
they.
They would not count in
They do not count.
quorum or majority, okay.
They can count in the quorum, Because when they said, and I think the wording was all the agencies be present, the majority of agencies present. But still, because we've got 6 now, 2 of them can be gone and you've got 4, you've got a majority of them there. So that's one thing that came up. Another thing that came up was just 1 vote per jurisdiction, which only gives 7 votes for the whole thing. And many times, the representatives don't all vote the same way. The 3 county commissioners don't always vote the same way. The Bremerton doesn't always vote the same way.
I think alternative B, the Bremerton has proposed, gives them too much power. Bremerton,
Yeah.
because if they they and the county commissioners come to an agreement for SKIA and want to take all the funding, the entire funding cycle, they could.
The other thing when I look at that, you want to remember that most of the port is housed within the city of Bremerton. And so I'm not saying that they always vote with Bremerton, but there's a lot of common interest there. Okay.
The thing I like about the current structure is it generally includes one of the small cities in the majority. So at least whether it's Paulsbo or us or Bainbridge, one of us is looking out for what's good for the small cities.
That could be a new condition. One of the small cities has to vote for it.
Well, that's.
Well, the two, right now you have to have
Currently, you
2.
have to have 2 cities, which is
Any 2 cities.
theoretically Bremerton and one of the small cities.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that was presented, because I was at the KRCC Executive Committee today, I think that's what we're called, and a population-based alternative was suggested to us. So if you would look at this number, every county commissioner would be voting for so many, and like we would each be about 6,500 is what we would represent.
What the county would.
Well,
Roll
I
the game
did,
again.
I did
Why do we
one,
only have 6,500? I don't get it.
12,000 divided by 2 votes.
Oh, divided by 2.
yeah.
We have the best representation.
Yeah,
we do. Right, and when I did, I took the population thing that they gave us, and I just quickly did one little scenario, and we only had to have 5 people vote for it, or 4 people vote for it to get it to pass based on population. So you wouldn't even have a majority of,
I like the historical structure. I think it's the fairest to the smaller.
Now, the other thing that was brought forward, it's this one that was in your packet tonight. And this was offered to us today by Rob Gelder brought it forward from the county. And it's a hybrid. And it's saying, it defines a quorum, meaning that at least 1 member of the county and the cities be represented. They're not worried about the port. I'm sure the port may be. But they're saying some of the administrative issues could perhaps be approved with a simple majority, and more of the policy items be approved by the weighted vote that would require 2 county commissioners and 2 cities. And I'm not particularly opposed to that one. What I see is in the future argument or discussion about what's an administrative and what's a policy, and I see that getting more complicated for us. But those are the basic ideas that have been brought forward, and again, we would like, to discuss it this evening and give Jeff some.
I would like to even take that a step farther. Bremerton came forward with their official position and mailed it out to all of the other members. If we can come to consensus here tonight, I would like us to draft a memorandum that's mailed to all the other cities so that they know what our official position is, and then their voting is, in favor of that position.
Does anyone of these have Paulsbo's idea?
Paulsbo was at the meeting, that's the population, the one that came forward from Becky.
Oh, that was the
And-
population one?
Yeah, and it didn't, I've got it here, and it only, she had 3 scenarios, and I only had to put them in one that made it not reasonable. Paulsbo was very strong today in that they are voting to keep the current, the current structure correct. Bainbridge is very strongly in support of the current structure.
So am I.
Me too.
Me too.
Well, I think we should be, because if you kind of look at this and realize that Bainbridge has 23,000 people and we have 12 to 13,000, and we both have the same number of votes, and then Paulsbo is not that far behind, and we have another vote over them, we're about as good as we could ever imagine being as far as voting representation. You know, just looking at this, we're only 1 vote behind cities that are 4 times larger than we are, or 3 times larger than we are. And the county, of course, significantly larger, so
And I'm
I
gonna,
agree, I think we should be.
yes, and Paulsbo is applying for to get their second vote. The way the KRCC bylaws are, as soon as they get to be 10,000, they have 2 representatives.
Oh, I see.
And so they are,
Go to 13 then?
Then there'll be
13 votes.
then there'll be
13.
13 votes, correct.
Are we making them wait till the next census, or are they,
You know, I think OFM,
OFM's trumping it,
So do we want to have mail a letter to the other jurisdictions? Are we in agreement to do
I
that
can
also?
do that. I think that's a great idea.
Well, I think Brandy should
yeah.
write
should
it
come
on
from
behalf of the
OFM.
council. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm strongly in support of leaving it as it is, and commissioners, 83,000.
What do we want to be? How would that benefit us?
It doesn't, it benefits Bremerton.
At Bremerton, right, what was brought forward by Bremerton shifts a lot of benefit to Bremerton.
I move that the city of Port Arthur's position on this is to remain the
The current
structure that we
voting
have
structure.
currently.
Yeah.
Second.
Which is outlined as alternative A in this.
Alternative A, current structure.
Second on that.
Mr. Mayor, we have a motion.
Should we all sign
Second.
it?
Should we ask for discussion?
Should all sign on that?
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
Unanimous.
So, direction is you're gonna write a letter.
Right, I can draft it and, Councilmember Corrali asked, also to do something on that letter, so I can prepare it and have it ready for, everybody to come by City Hall this week and mail it out Monday before.
And you just
As long
email me.
as it's got somebody from the city, I don't,
I'll bring it to you.
okay, fine,
Yeah.
fine.
We have finance,
Let's just
finance
send
on
this out.
Friday?
Yeah,
Could it be brought to the finance committee Friday morning?
3 of us.
Yeah, 3 of us, 1 false vote.
Okay, and if you have,
Okay.
and if you have any questions on the funding piece, just,
Appreciate
Now,
that.
is,
Yes.
I'm a little bit confused on the ILA. Is it still a document that needs to be changed?
there are some points, and yes, and we had that discussion today also. One of the primary things it's doing is it's defining us as a joint board. And apparently that's very important for a legal issue. Okay. The other thing
Do
that,
you know what that issue is?
Roger, something Roger brought forward.
yes, something Roger brought forward, and then when he brought it forward, that's the city attorney from Bremerton. When he brought it forward, it triggered some things with PSRC, because PSRC is unfortunate as we have. And now they're trying to correct their structure, and but they're trying to do it through the state legislature. But the other thing in the ILA that was put in place as a result of the committee Rob sat on is if we wanted to hire, we could, and that's totally absent the current ILA. And so we'd be
That's
putting
what I
that.
thought was driving the need to change the ILA, but now that it appears that they're gonna just extend or do another RFP, then we wouldn't necessarily be hiring somebody.
So my
right?
understanding is, we had the ability to employ staff when it was initially formed. And then it had something to do with workers' comp, because Mary was a contract employee. And we had to change the ILA to make, so we took that option off the table so that Mary could be a contract employee and us not having to pay workers' comp.
Well, what's the future of KRCC? Are they going to go out with an RFP and try to get another consultant?
Yes, that would,
So, in essence, the structure of us to our consultant isn't really gonna change, so that's why I'm confused. Why do we need to change the ILA?
and that was one of the questions we had. And it was because we need to do this joint board piece. And I asked, were we going to leave in the language allowing us to hire? And that was yes, because.
Well, if you're gonna change it, you might as well change it.
Exactly, if you're gonna change it, yeah,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Good job, Beck.
Good job, thank you.
Can you do my income taxes?
A little late.
Oh, when are they due?
Yesterday.
Good tonight, thank you.
No, I already did.